As tensions with Iran spike again, the Pentagon has quietly put a second U.S. aircraft carrier strike group on standby for the Gulf, signaling that Washington wants the option of rapidly scaling up its military pressure in the region. According to U.S. officials, the order is for a full strike group to spin up carrier, escort ships, and air wing together, so it can be sent to Middle Eastern waters on short notice if the decision is made to move from deterrence to potential combat. These developments were first detailed in a February 11th report by the Wall Street Journal, which cited 3 unnamed officials describing contingency planning for a possible campaign of strikes against Iranian targets. The officials stressed that the move is about being ready for a potential attack on Iran, framing the preparation as a way to give the president credible military options if diplomacy or deterrence alone no longer seems sufficient. If deployed, the second carrier would operate alongside the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is already on station near Iran with its own complement of fighter jets, guided missile escorts, and strike capabilities. Officials say the likely candidate is the USS George H.W. Bush, now finishing training off the Virginia coast and able to cut that schedule short so it can leave within about 2 weeks for the Middle East theater. One U.S. official cautioned that no final order has been signed but admitted a deployment directive could be issued within hours if the situation worsens, while still leaving open the possibility that the plan is shelved if tensions ease. All of this comes just after President Donald Trump publicly floated the idea of sending a second carrier if the indirect nuclear talks with Iran in Oman collapse, warning that failure at the table could quickly be followed by a far more muscular U.S. naval buildup.
As you know, we have a massive flotilla right now going over to Iran. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal. I think they'd be foolish if they didn't. We took out their nuclear power last time, and we'll have to see if we take out more this time.
Do you think a deal with Iran, with this current regime, would ever really stick?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I know one thing. They want to make a deal. They wouldn't talk to anybody else, but they're talking to me. But, you know, it's a good question. A lot of people say no. And I would say that I'd rather make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. No nuclear weapons, no missiles, no this, no that, all the different things that you want. But some people worry that they've been very dishonest with us over the years, right? Very dishonest. Obama and Biden, what they did in terms of creating a monster with Iran was terrible. That Iran nuclear deal was one of the dumbest deals I've ever seen.
Iranian political and security insiders say that if Washington sends a second aircraft carrier into Gulf waters, Tehran will read it not as routine deterrence but as a clear signal that the US is actively gearing up for open conflict, drastically shrinking the space for miscalculation or de-escalation. Officials close to Iran's leadership have warned that they will not accept fresh layers of US military pressure while talks are ongoing, insisting that threatening deployments or new buildups during negotiations contradict the spirit of dialogue and could force Tehran to toughen, rather than soften, its positions at the table. Sources aligned with the Iranian government argue that any surge in American naval firepower off Iran's coast risks poisoning the delicate Oman Channel, because every additional warship reinforces a domestic narrative that Washington is negotiating with one hand while preparing a potential strike with the other. On February 6th, delegations from the US and Iran met indirectly in Muscat, Oman, with Omani mediators carrying messages between the two sides as they focused primarily on the contours of Iran's nuclear program, sanctions relief, and what limits or guarantees might be needed to keep tensions from spiraling into war. Diplomats say both sides are open in principle to a follow-up session, but the timing, format, and even the host city for a second round remain undecided, leaving the process in a fragile holding pattern where a single misstep, political, military, or rhetorical, could easily derail further engagement. The news that the Pentagon was preparing a second carrier group broke soon after Iran aired an unusually explicit live television display of its ballistic and cruise missile arsenal, a choreographed show of force meant to remind both domestic audiences and foreign rivals that any escalation at sea would be met by substantial retaliatory capabilities on land. On January 30th, Iranian state television's Channel 3 turned its studio into a stage for military hardware, broadcasting a live program in which several of the country's headline missiles were physically showcased under bright lights before viewers at home. The broadcast featured full-scale displays of the hypersonic Fattah missile, the mid-range Zolfaghar, and the long-range Kheibar Shekan, all rolled into a studio packed with a live audience as presenters and guests talked up their range, speed, and ability to hit targets as far away as Israel. During the program, war documentarian Ali Khalili declared that Iranians don't play games when it comes to defending their soil, warning that whether the adversary is Israel or its master the United States, Iran is prepared to use these missiles decisively if its territory comes under serious threat. Against the backdrop of Iran's live missile showcase and fresh threats of retaliation, President Donald Trump welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House, turning their meeting into a high-stakes consultation on how to balance diplomacy with the possibility of military action against Tehran. After more than 2 hours of closed-door talks, Trump acknowledged that nothing definitive had been decided on Iran, saying he listened to Netanyahu's security concerns but ultimately insisted that Washington's negotiations with Tehran should continue for now rather than locking in any new joint plan. Trump reiterated that his first choice is to strike a new deal that reins in Iran's nuclear and missile activities, yet he coupled that with a stark warning that if talks collapse, Iran could instead face something very tough, a phrase widely read as shorthand for renewed US strikes on its nuclear sites. Tehran, for its part, has responded by vowing that any new American attack would be met not by symbolic gestures but by direct missile strikes on US bases across the Middle East, explicitly warning host countries that they could also be dragged into the fallout. The US military has meanwhile surged its own capabilities, sending the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group, additional guided missile destroyers, and reinforced air defense systems into the wider Gulf region, creating a visible armada that underscores how quickly any misstep could escalate into open clashes. If the Pentagon proceeds with plans to deploy a second carrier alongside the Lincoln, it would mark the first time in nearly a year that 2 full US carrier strike groups have massed off Iran's shores, signaling an unmistakable surge in pressure even as diplomats still talk about giving negotiations one more chance.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.